introduce you to Monica McConkey. And I'm just going to do a quick bio. Monica, we're so happy to have you here. But I know that you have about 25 years plus experience in behavioral health as a counselor, program supervisor, administrator, and you have a master's in counseling, and you're a licensed professional counselor at the state of Minnesota. Um, One of the things that I, love about you and your work is just your focus throughout your career. You know how it's been to increase access to and remove the stigma often attached to mental health services in rural underserved areas.
Mm-hmm.
And also just want to share, from your bio that you grew up on a farm in northwestern Minnesota and you have an intimate understanding of the dynamics leading to farm stress and its impact on farm families. And I hope I have this right. I think, are you one of the 2 rural mental health specialists in Minnesota providing support to
I
farmers?
am, yeah.
Mhm.
There's 2 full-time positions, and Ted Matthews, who is a longstanding
Right.
counselor, retired last summer, so they added 2 gals, and they're each half-time. So
Oh,
there's
okay.
3 of us, but technically, yeah, 2
Wow.
positions.
For the whole state. Oh my
Yes.
gosh. Oh my gosh. And I know that, you travel across the country,
Mhm.
educating and speaking on rural mental health
Yeah.
and resilience, which is a huge piece. And you have your own consulting company, which we can
Mhm.
talk about more. But I know that, we've been really fortunate to have had you engage with 100 Rural Women from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And that's been wonderful. And you've presented and done some work with us on
Mhm.
QPR,
Yeah.
and have been in our spotlight profile. So I again just really want to welcome you and thank you for participating in this. And really, the goal of this podcast is how do we better share women's stories, and how do we
Mhm.
figure out how we can envision our futures and see how other women have navigated, and figure out what resources and support there is out there for women, and
Yeah.
how we can better support each other. So as you know, you've heard my patter, that's always my deal.
Yeah.
And then I keep thinking, I met you when we first started 100 Rural Women, when we
Yes.
were doing our initial research, and we did that
Oh.
in northwestern Minnesota. And all of a sudden it's like, one of these days we're going to meet in person.
Yes, one day we will. One day we will.
I love it. Well, we'll get started here. And
Mm.
uh, the first question is, can you share a lesson that you learned from one of your grandmothers or another influential woman in your life?
Sure. So, yeah, I think about both of my grandmothers, and they lived similar lives in some respects, but one of my grandmothers had 15 children. Yes, and
Yeah.
lost 2. One is a baby and one is a teenage boy. My other grandmother had 2 girls, one who died when she was 12 years old, leaving my mom as a single
Ah.
child, an only child. And she had had issues with miscarriages and lost twin boys and um, later in her pregnancy. And so, when I think about both of my grandmothers, I think about loss
Mm.
and how they experienced loss. And even in the face of that loss, they kept going. I mean, just incredible, incredible resilience. And so I think that's what stands out to me the most when I think about my grandmothers was this very quiet resilience that they wouldn't have termed it that. They were just trying to feed families and survive and, keep everything keep kids clothed and fed and the house in order and the farms running. Um, but there was just this very quiet resilience in the face of a lot of grief.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think as we keep talking here too, I see that foundation in where you are today and the work you do. So
Mhm.
that's really quite interesting to think about the parallels and what an influence your grandmother's had on you. So
Mm.
tell us a little bit about rural, and I know you have a lot of connections to rural, but tell us a little bit about your connection to rural.
Oh, goodness. Well, my whole life really has been rural. So I grew up on a farm right outside of Bijou, Minnesota. Bijou, population of less than 100.
Oh my gosh.
So very rural up in Monoman County, Minnesota, where close to where I live right now. And grew up on a farm, and it, was very embedded in all things farming, agriculture, 4-H, FFA, livestock, you name it. We helped in the fields. We're very involved in the farming operation, and I've spent actually the majority of my 30 years working in rural communities in the area of behavioral health. So I love rural. I love the opportunities that rural gives or allows people in terms of their own personal growth and development. I love the community connections that can happen in rural that we just don't see as much in, maybe urban metro types of settings. So yeah, rural, gosh, it means the world to me, um, and has been absolutely integral to the person that I am.
I love it. And is your family still living in rural?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yep, they still so my parents are on the farm. They're in their later 70s, still working on the farm just like they did when they were,
Wow.
40. And my brother would be the fourth generation on the farm, and my middle son is the fifth generation. So
Ah,
he works with his uncle, my brother, and his grandma and grandpa, my parents. So yes, very, the farm is like the anchor. Even for my kids who didn't grow up there, the grandma and grandpa's farm is like in so many ways the anchor of the family.
and tell us a little bit about your work and how did you end up doing this work?
Yeah. Wow. You think about when you think about over the course of your lifetime, the doors that close and the doors that open, and how often we really fight against those closed doors.
Yeah.
And some closed doors are worth fighting against, right? It's worth it. But some closed doors are really closed because there's another purpose for you. And that has just been so true throughout my career. I went into my career, even I think way back in grad school, my thought was, oh, I knew I wanted to go into counseling, and there were two tracks: community counseling and uh, school counseling.
Mm, mhm.
And I remember thinking, I'm never going to work with kids in a school. And so I did the community counseling track. And then for the next 20 years, I worked with kids in school systems,
I love it.
and which was so great. And that just opened up opportunities. So I worked for 17 years for an agency out of Bemidji, Minnesota, who contracted with rural districts, and it was really a collaborative approach. So I was in the Monoman Nadawash School District for many years, and then went on to administrative roles within Stellar to support the programs, write grants, things like that. From there, in 2014, I moved to Prairie St. John's in Fargo, North Dakota. So Prairie is an inpatient psychiatric facility that really serves people who are experiencing a mental health crisis. So typically we see folks that, were suicidal, homicidal, having, maybe an episode of psychosis, things like that. And I was there with director of business development. So again, I was able to, look at needs, how do we expand services, writing grants, connecting with the community. And really, even though we were based in Fargo, our patients came from rural North Dakota, rural Minnesota. So lots of connections in small towns. Well, during it was in 2016, and I got a call from Don Wick up at the Red River Farm Network in Grand Forks. And he said that they interview farmers. for the broadcast, radio broadcast. And one of the farmers that he had routinely been interviewing had been hospitalized for a suicide attempt. And that was like a big for them, in the broadcasting role, it was kind of an awakening, like, wow, we're in crisis here. And so he wanted to partner with a mental health agency, get some word out around farm stress, farm suicide, mental health. And he just picked Prairie randomly and came in, met with me, not knowing I had farm connections. And it's like that was
Yeah.
such an open door. It was incredible. So from there, I started while working at Prairie, I just started doing some work in the farm stress realm, connected with Minnesota Department of Agriculture, Minnesota Extension, and then in 2019, the opportunity came. The legislature had doubled funding for the farm stress program, meaning adding one more person because there was one there. So doubling went from one to two. And I threw in my proposal and they accepted it. So I jumped into the self-employment world and contracted with the state. And since 2019 have been really focusing on serving Minnesota farmers and ranchers. And I do a fair bit of traveling throughout the country, speaking on farm stress, rural mental health issues, and do a bit of contract work in North Dakota and Wisconsin as well. So that, in a nutshell, was
Yeah.
the path.
So of course, I have a lot of questions, but just with the most recent part of your career to
Mhm.
today, what are you seeing today with all the stress we have right now in the farm economy? Are you having are you seeing more of an uptick in need? Um,
Absolutely.
yeah,
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 absolutely. I get calls every day from farmers. I'm out on farms, doing Zoom sessions with farmers or family members, and there's definitely a sense of worry, panic. I would even say in some
right,
situations. Uh, right now, in fact, we're getting kind of to year end and into the new year, and decisions have to be made about putting a crop in next year and what do we do and where's the money coming from if prices don't change. And so yes, I would say at least once a day I'm talking to someone who's having suicidal thoughts, whose
right.
relationships are falling apart because of the amount of stress they're under, who just don't know where to turn. What do we do? How do we not do this anymore? I mean, this farm has been in our family for 120, 30 years. How do we not have it be in our family anymore? How do I not farm when that's what I know and who I am? So yeah, having really big discussions when it comes to end of year, heading into the new year. Our farmers and their families are thinking about, we have to buy seed, fertilizer, chemical for this next year. And when things are looking dire, there's a lot of worry, panic, overwhelm that they're experiencing in terms of what should we do? Are we going to make it? Are we going to be able to hold on to this farm that's been in the family for 120 to 130 years? And if we can't, then what? Um, and so our farmer's identity is very connected to their farm and their work. And so when they are not able to fulfill that role, that's when we see a lot of hopelessness, risk of suicide elevate, relationships falling apart, health impacts, high blood pressure, um, just, all uh, sleep disturbance, appetite disturbance.
Yeah, and tell me, Monica, too. So I know you work, with the person that's, really struggling, and then tell me a little
Uh-huh.
bit about how you work with their families. I mean, how does that work?
Yeah. So, the program that I work in now that's funded by the state legislature, it allows for us to work with, farmers, ranchers, and their family members. So many times, just due to the nature of farming and that stoicism and the pride, a lot of times, especially male farmers, aren't super open
Right.
to talking to somebody and ask for help. Although I will say the majority of my caseload is male farmers. So that's really positive. So at times I am able to support the family members. So I'll, meet with the spouse, help her manage. And I say her, sometimes it's him, um, but help them manage their own stress, their own challenges, anxiety, depression, because we know that when you have a family system, even if one part of the system changes, the whole system is impacted. So if we can, even if we're not maybe getting to the person that's having the mental health impacts, if we can help the people that surround them to be okay, to regulate emotions, to take care of themselves, it still impacts the whole system. So I do work with a lot of spouses, kids of that are in family farm situations. And I work with a lot of multi-generational families that are trying to farm together. And with the
Mhm.
stress and the relationships, there's just so much conflict, especially if there's this transition or succession plan for the farm that's trying to happen in times when, farming is not making a profit. So lots of family dynamics. Um, and that's a pretty typical call as well. Like, I'm just not getting along with my farming partners.
Right. A lot of stress. And like you said, when I think, that's sort of spending a lot of time on a farm as a kid with my great uncle who farmed the family farm for years. Just the stress with weather
Mm,
and I think that people who aren't involved in farming just don't realize the lift when you need to buy seed for the
mm,
next year and what that is and the financial implications and the risk. So it's such a high
major
risk,
risk.
but super independent people. And yeah, it's a whole different way of life. It's an amazing way of life, but it's very high
Very high
stress life.
stress.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And jumping back just to the early part of the career, what you
Hmm.
weren't going to do when you came out of school.
Yes.
Yeah, I was on school board for many years, and I think one of the biggest struggles always had, and today I don't even want to think about it, but just the
Mm,
lack of school counselors. And I just think about the school district I was in, and we were so shorthanded and
right.
in such a critical piece. So I don't know if you have any thoughts
Hmm.
on just your observation on school counseling and anything that you'd
Yeah.
want to share on that.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things that I mean, the need that you're talking about
Hmm.
really is what prompted Stellar to provide the services they do. And now many organizations across Minnesota, the state supports school-based mental health services.
Right.
But with that type of programming related to our schools, especially in small communities, and other services in small communities, it really is all about collaboration. When we have multiple people or organizations coming together to say, hey, we want to do this, we can't do this alone. So we're going to come together, pool resources to make this happen. I mean, that is such a win for our rural communities because with low population density,
Right.
rarely can you get, in many ways, businesses, retail businesses, helping professions, healthcare. It is really hard to have one entity try to try to sustain. And so when there can be joint collaborative efforts in our rural communities, that's beautiful. So when I started working in the Monoma School District, it was funded. There were county dollars, there were some state grant dollars, there were dollars through the County Human Service Center. There were probably 3 to 4 funding sources that came
Mhm.
together as a collaboration to make the position possible. And that was really the only way it was going to happen because the school district, they could put in a little, the county could put in a little, the state could put in a little, and that made it work.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, and I hear you on that too. I think, and that's the only way rural communities survive is
Yep.
having to be very collaborative and very
Mhm.
creative and innovative.
Mhm.
And I think what I always love about working with rural people that live in rural is just, people talk about entrepreneurship. It's like, oh my gosh, that's total entrepreneurship. And that's the way you figure it out. And well, you just had such an
Absolutely.
interesting career. And when you think about, what are some of the most rewarding, what's a couple of most rewarding things you've done in your career
Mm.
and personally? I mean, what?
Yeah. Oh, goodness. Well, what comes to mind right away is way back in my, the helping of people
Mhm.
and seeing that help still providing support in their life years and years and years later. So I think about one young lady that was really little, kindergartner, when I started in the school district. And that would have been, many years ago. And now she's a young mom with 5 kids in a good supportive relationship. And that is just what feeds my soul.
Yeah.
Like the little impact that I was honored to have in her life early on that hopefully played a role in getting her to where she is now is incredible. I mean, just an incredible feeling. And that has carried through, I would say, through my career. Now, when I, am meeting with um, farmers and their families, and I do a survey, kind of a satisfaction survey at the end of every year. And some of the comments that come back are just, oh my goodness, I just get like my spine tingles just thinking about it. It's so fulfilling. And I'm just really honored to be able to be in this position and, to be able to use, the gifts that I've been granted to do this work. And so super rewarding. Personally, I have 3 kids, 3 beautiful kids that are all now in their early 20s, not even early anymore. Goodness, 22, 23, and 25. And they're such gifts to my life. And um, it's always a joy. I am in touch with them all every day, whether we talk or snap or text or share something on Instagram or see each other actually in person. And that's a major joy in my life. But yeah, it's been incredible to go. I had a lot of trepidation about leaving a secure job with benefits and going into the self-employment world where you kind of have to figure out taxes and health insurance and making sure you're getting enough contracts to meet your needs. And um, gosh, it just took off in a way I would have never dreamed. And so, yeah,
It
really
is
good
it is a big
things.
step to leave that sort of that secure base, and I've done it too,
Hmm.
I always think, "Oh, that was probably the dumbest financial thing I've ever done in my whole life." But just I think, as I just listened to you talk about that personal fulfillment, and that's a huge piece for me too. It's just like,
Hmm.
gosh, getting to be a part of people's lives and also, it's, you have a little more flexibility. You probably don't,
Yeah.
sometimes the income doesn't work out. That's too pretty flexible too, but just having that ability to, sort of be
Yeah.
your own person there
It is so
is
good. I work way
amazing.
harder for myself when it's you and everything's hinging on you. I have great support. I have a significant other his name is Bill. He's been in my life for over 10 years. And I mean, he is my right hand person,
I
when
love it.
I um, need support or advice or, just like Monica, you need to leave your desk for a while and we need to go do something. Um, yeah, so that helps.
So, talked about your career, your life, but did you know what you wanted to do when you were growing up? And did you ever think
Hmm,
you'd be doing what you're doing?
Never. So I think I was like the typical farm girl, and for many years wanted to be a veterinarian, taking care of all the little kitties and calves and what have you. And I still remember I was sitting, Teresa, in eighth grade biology, and we had to dissect something, and I was like, no more veterinarian for me.
I love it.
And I don't know, I've been asked that question before, and I think it was multiple factors that led me into choosing my bachelor's degree is in psychology. And when I think back when I was even a kid, I was kind of the one that my peers would call to talk through issues and problems and like to be that listening ear.
Right.
And I also think about the impact of uh, when I grew up, which was, my a lot of my growing up was in the 80s during a major farm crisis. And so I saw my parents, oh gosh, really struggling, lots of anxiety, depression, and they still had to do the work. It's not like they could take time off to, feel better or even get help. And during my teenage years, my dad actually did seek out a counselor. And at the time, it was, I think, state funded or USDA funded, came to these little towns, set up shop like in an office in the county courthouse for farmers. And he accessed that service and life changing for him.
Mm,
Did I ever in a million years think that's what I would be doing later in life? Not at all. So again, it kind of goes back to those open doors. And I absolutely believe, there's a higher power that kind of has the bigger picture of our lives and where we're going. And I read a quote one time that our job is really to be prepared for the open doors when they come. And so I've always thought about that what can I do to position myself to be ready when the door
mm.
opens to walk through it, which is hard because sometimes we don't know what that door is going to be or look like. Um, so yeah, it's been a journey. I can't wait to see what's in the future.
That's right. That's right. And just going back to your grandmother's, it's interesting. You don't see it, but there's that thread that
Yeah.
goes through in your life for sure.
Yeah.
So we're lucky to have you doing this work.
Thank you.
So on a different note, tell me a
Mhm.
little bit, what do you do for fun and what do you do to
Mm,
recharge? I mean, your work
mm.
is super heavy. And as you said, you do your survey at the end and you hear things from people and you really, it's really fulfilling. But,
Yeah.
how do you do it? I mean, how do you handle all the heavy work and just recharge and
Yeah.
stay going forward?
I think it's an ongoing struggle, and what I really try to be aware of is, am I starting to lose empathy because of the overload? Because I hear these really hard stories, um, and emotion all day, every day. And so I've got to be very aware for me to be my best for the clients that I'm serving. I have got to stay in a place where I'm okay.
Mhm.
And so what that looks like is a lot of the same things I'm helping them with. So I work on just basic foundational things like, am I getting decent sleep? Am I eating decent food? Am I drinking enough water? Do I have my basic needs met? So I don't have to have that as a risk factor when I'm trying to help other people. Because obviously, if I'm sick, if I'm tired, if I'm not feeling well, that's going to trump everything with our functioning. If we're sick, that kind of comes first. That dictates everything we do. And so I try to take care of myself physically, try to get out for walks. I love hiking. I'm actually, it's like we just need a little bit more snow and I can snowshoe or cross country ski. Trying to, not dread winter, not spend all my time indoors. So nature has been a really big thing for me, with, just healing psychologically, emotionally, staying okay. Love gardening, flower gardening, vegetable gardening. So that's always been fun. Love going to the farm, helping them, as they need help, especially planting and harvest. Um, I usually get away in the winter. My parents winter in Florida, so when the crop's off, they head south and stay all winter. And so I usually get down there to get some vitamin D and
That's
warmth,
right.
and yeah, so that's good. But yeah, so just the physical taking care of myself. I try to, surround myself with good, positive people. So kind of, I would refer to that as a social protective factor. Like I don't want to put myself around people that are toxic or, uh, you know, I'm yeah, I keep try to keep my relationships very positive people. Even the people I follow on social media, I try to cut out negativity. I watch my intake of political things. I just have to be aware of that. Um, And then psychologically, I would say that's probably the biggest is that I'm constantly in tune with how I'm thinking. So if my thoughts become like self-deprecating, negative, if I'm sitting in emotion that's not helpful, that's my sign that hey, I need to get my thinking in order and
Mhm.
make my thoughts work for me versus against me. Then I would say the last thing is really just spiritually, um, having that having that belief in, for me personally, I'm a Christian, believe in God, but for anybody, it's that belief in something outside of themselves that gives them hope. Um, Really big. And it is, for some people that feeding of their soul comes with being in nature or volunteering or the more traditional like religious or faith practices. But I really encourage my clients to practice whatever that is for them in their life because it brings so much strength and resilience to us.
Yeah, and you touched on this a little bit, and I think, when we think about toxic and social media
Mm,
and just some of the things that are, overwhelming things that are happening in our nation right
mhm,
now, and you talked about this a little bit about, making sure that you're around positive people and,
mhm,
how do you stay positive and you talked a little bit about hope. I mean, what what is your hope for the future?
hmm.
What do you see as your hope for the future? What gives you hope, I should say, for the future?
Yeah. Gosh, I think I'm a pretty positive person, so I don't spend a lot of time allowing myself to dwell on, negative things or things that aren't going right. If things aren't going right, I very much try to take like a problem solving approach. Like, how can we make it better versus I'm just going to sit in this
Right.
negativity. What gives me hope for the future? Oh gosh, that's a good question. Um, I love to think about, grandkids one day, my kids getting married and starting families of their own and just the increase of our family. That is very hopeful for me. Um, I love my work. I love the opportunities that it brings. I love the people that I get to come in contact with. So that's always very hopeful and forward thinking for me. Um, even the change of seasons, like it's winter now, I have my things that, I'm excited to do this winter. When spring comes, I'll have my things that I'm excited to do in the spring
Right.
and summer and fall. And so it's very much like forward looking, forward focused. I don't hang on to like grudges or resentments. I used to more. When I was younger, I absolutely spent more time in that negative thinking pattern and, oh, this person that and this person that and they did this and I just don't anymore. I just don't have room for it, I guess. I
Yeah,
don't
good
have
for you.
space for it.
Mhm.
So, yeah, just I'm a planner. I'm a bit of a dreamer, so just thinking about the future and all the good things that, you know, can come our way. And so, yeah.
I love it. And I think that that positive, finding the positive and finding where you can work together, that's I mean, that's where I'm at because
Yeah.
otherwise things can be so overwhelming and you
Oh,
just gotta.
so heavy.
Yeah,
Like people, both clients and with like if I'm speaking to a group of people, to help them understand that concept. Because a lot of people don't grasp that, you know what, I get to choose what I think about,
right.
which therefore means I really get to choose how I feel because what we think about drives how we feel. And there are so many people that feel very powerless to change either thoughts or emotions. And so, one activity I do with folks is whether it's a group in a room or me with a client, I will have them look around the room and tell me everything you notice that you see that's red. And so
Okay.
they'll look around the room and they'll be searching for the reds and picking out the reds. And then I'll say, okay, now I want you to look around the room and tell me everything you notice that's blue. So they'll look around the room and they'll be taking in the blue things. And then my question to them is, were the blues there when you were looking for the reds?
Ah,
And some people are like, no. And some people are like, yes, but we didn't see them because we weren't looking for them.
right.
And that is really a great kind of analogy for how life is, that the blues are the blessings, the things we have to be thankful for, the things that are going right and going well. And so often we overlook that and we allow ourselves to see through a lens of red. Like we're seeing the problems, we're seeing the negatives, we're seeing what's not going right, who's wronged us, et cetera, et cetera. And so if we can change our lens and see all of the goodness, all of the things that are going well, deal with the reds as they pop up. But what happens is when we're only seeing reds, then we anticipate more reds, we look for more reds, I knew there'd be problems. There's always problems. My life always goes this way. And it's like, well, gosh, that's because that's what you're looking for. That's what you're anticipating. And, we dig really deep down. And I've had some people tell me, well, I'm thankful for my family and that's about all I have. And I'm like, do you have hot running water in your house? Like, that's incredible. Many people in the world don't even have that. Do you have shelter over your head? Do you worry about where your food comes from? No. Does your does your kidney both of your kidneys work the way they're supposed to? Do you have all 10 toes that are doing what they're supposed to do? I mean, it's endless, endless the things that we have to be thankful for. And we so take it for granted. So it's just switching that lens. And I think that's a big thing for me is I just try to appreciate and have excitement and have things to look forward to in my life.
I love that. It's a super, super good approach. And I love that exercise. I have to
Yeah.
remember that. Tell me a little bit about, at 100 Real Women, we're all about
Hmm.
supporting and connecting real women and getting real women to have more confidence in their leadership and better informed. You know, what do you think we can do to better support rural women? What are some of your
Hmm.
thoughts around that?
Well, I've got to say, I have loved what you guys have done. I especially love the empowering women to step into leadership roles, run for office, to step out there because in so many of our rural communities, you look at the county commissioners and it's like all men. And so we need to have those female voices out there. So I have really appreciated that initiative through 100 Rural Women is the the promoting of a leadership role. Um, I think I think a lot of rural women, you had talked about the entrepreneurship in rural earlier. And I think a lot of rural women have ideas and they have thoughts and they're not really sure how to or can I. They're lacking self confidence. Like, how do I put my idea into action? How do I jumpstart? How do I look
Right.
for funding or grants to get my idea off the ground? And then how in the world do I keep it running when I live in a community of, 600 people? And so I think the continued empowering of women to connect, so lowering isolation, and then also, hey, you've got great ideas that you can take and run with. And, there's going to be plenty of not the things that happen that you're not planning. I was going to call them failures. We won't call them failures because it's all about learning. But, you know, you can keep going. Just keep going, keep pursuing your dreams. Uh, yeah, just not being stuck, not feeling like,
Right.
oh, here I am in this little community. What is, you know, I don't feel like I can leave. I don't feel like I want to leave, but I also feel like I'm not maybe living my passion.
Right, right. And I think, in these smaller rural communities, women are leading all the time, but they are not in formal leadership roles.
Correct.
And that's the hard part. So I agree.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, what do you, uh, you know, even for running for office, for example, you
Hmm.
have everything you need. Women just second guess themselves so much, but
Hmm.
they have
So
so many
much.
skills and
Hmm.
so much experience and expertise. And when we did our initial research with 100 Rural Women that you were part of when we
Hmm.
did that 100 meetings across the state, I mean, that was, we had 6 themes that came out of that, but it was really mentorship. That was a thread that came through that. But that
Mm,
mentorship is, what we learned is people want to learn from other people's journeys. So that's why I'm
yeah.
super excited with this podcast because I think
Yes.
it's just another way for people to say, oh, Monica did that. That's how she did that.
Right.
Gosh, I could do
Right.
that. So it's sort of that whole modeling piece that I think is really
Yes.
a big part of mentorship and what that looks like.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
hearing those stories, and then it
Yeah.
it doesn't take any big groundbreaking
Right.
effort to make it happen. You set your goals, you be consistent, you kind of take the risk,
Right.
march forward, surround yourself with good people.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. And so, well, we're getting to the end here, but I like to close with this question. It's sort of a
Mhm.
two-part question, but it's like, what advice would you give your younger self?
Hmm.
And secondly, what advice would you give a younger rural woman trying to navigate life right now?
Gosh,
So
that
that's
kind of brings little tears to my eyes, Teresa, to be honest.
I know it's
Um, so advice to my younger self, oh, it would definitely be, talk to yourself like you talk to your best friend. Don't don't be looking at your faults or second guessing yourself or comparing yourself. Oh, women do that so much. We compare ourselves to other women and feel like we're less than. And yeah, if I could tell my younger self that, I would just encourage her, like, you have amazing strengths. There are great things coming your way. Don't be shy. I mean, I'm still an introvert, but wow, was I introverted. Didn't, didn't interact with people really through college. It's just crazy to think about now. But just that boosting of self-worth, of valuing yourself, of seeing yourself as a really incredible person. And I think for a rural woman, a young rural woman, any rural woman,
Mhm.
one of the things I love, love, love doing is connecting people with others that have shared interest, with organizations that can help them. And so, I mean, my encouragement would be, don't give up. Whatever your dream is, if your dream is to be a stay-at-home mom and raise your kids, that's awesome. There's no that does not devalue you because you're not working and bringing a paycheck in. pursue that dream if at all possible. If your dream is, I want to finish this degree and enter this career field, go for it. Um, don't, work on not pausing, not self-deprecating, not self-sabotaging. So it really comes down to that thinking. Like, are your thoughts working for you or against you? And keep your thinking in a good positive space, because that's going to impact your feelings, that's going to impact your functioning. So yeah, just that encouragement to keep going, don't give up. There's always a way. Some doors are going to close. That's probably a blessing, because other doors are going to open that you never thought would open.
Uh, that's great, good advice, and I know that question is sort of related but different, and
Yeah.
I love to hear that because it is. You look back and think, "Ah, what was I thinking? Why wasn't I?"
Yeah.
And so anything I
Yeah.
think we can do to help these next generations, all women for sure, but in particular, young women who are trying to
Yeah.
figure out
Young rural women.
how to make it in
And I
rural.
remember feeling, I came from a school where there were 60 some kids in my class,
Right,
65 kids, and went to a university where I'm sitting in, classes of 200. And I so second guessed myself, like, what do I know? I came from this little town, did not have the resources that other kids were coming from the metro or wherever. And just really reframing the strength that you have coming from rural,
right.
because there is incredible strength in rural that we really undervalue in ourselves and our communities.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, anything else that
Hmm.
you'd like to share? I just appreciate you that meeting today with me, and
Yeah,
it's always just so much fun to learn more about each other, and I mean the whole goal is for our audience to learn more about you, your work, and how you've. I mean, I'm always curious. It's like how people navigate and how
yeah,
they how they go forward and what's their outlook. And so, yeah, anything else you'd want to
right.
add before we close today?
Oh, goodness. I think we covered a lot.
We did.
I
We
think we're
did.
good. I just want to thank you and 100 Rural Women and the work that you have put into building this initiative, and all the great people, that have come along during that journey. I think it's wonderful.
Well, thank you so much. And I'll just echo what you said. It's such an honor to do this work.
Absolutely.
And I always say every day I get to meet such amazing people
Yeah.
like you. And I've just loved that I've been able to, interact with you and build a relationship with you over these years. And as I said in the beginning, one of these days we're going to meet in person. It's just
We
going to happen.
will. And it'll
Um,
probably happen when we're not even expecting it. We'll
that's
be at
right.
a conference or something. It'll be
That's
like,
right.
oh,
It's like, oh yeah, I've seen you before.
yeah.
Well, thanks so much, Monica, and I just really appreciate you. So thanks for sharing with us today.